Imagine stepping into an America of 100 or even 150 years ago, a world where dinner tables were filled with dishes that would make modern eyes widen in disbelief. The 19th century was a time of innovation, survival, and curiosity in the kitchen. From bustling city streets to quiet rural farms, Americans ate foods that were shaped not just by taste, but by necessity, culture, and the available ingredients of the era. Some dishes were considered delicacies, while others were humble attempts to make the most out of every part of an animal or every morsel of food. Back then, cooks were resourceful, creative, and occasionally a little daring. They experimented with flavors, textures, and combinations that might seem strange today. Yet these dishes were loved, celebrated, and even considered luxurious in their time. Some recipes were imported from Europe, adapted to local ingredients, and transformed into something uniquely American. Others emerged from the rugged frontier, crafted from whatever ingredients pioneers, miners, and farmers had on hand. In this video, we're diving into 10 crazy foods that Americans actually ate in the 19th century. These aren't your standard historical meals. They are foods that shock, amuse, and fascinate. Each dish tells a story of the people who made it, the society they lived in, and the tastes that defined an era. From jellied meats to unusual pies, from hearty survival stews to extravagant banquets, these foods reveal a past that is at once bizarre and deeply human. So, take a deep breath, step back in time, and let's explore the flavors, quirks, and culinary adventures of a forgotten America, one strange, surprising dish at a time. Point 1. Mock turtle soup. Picture a steaming bowl of soup, rich, savory, and oddly comforting, but made from the head of a calf. This was mock turtle soup, a dish that might make modern diners shudder, yet in 19th century America, it was considered a luxurious treat. Inspired by the much-coveted green turtle soup of Europe, Americans devised a clever and economical way to recreate the flavor using calf's head, giving it a gelatinous richness that was surprisingly indulgent. The origins of mock turtle soup trace back to Victorian kitchens, where chefs and home cooks alike sought to emulate European delicacies without the expensive imported ingredients. The dish typically combined minced calf's head, vegetables, spices, and sometimes sherry or Madeira, simmered slowly to achieve a hearty, flavorful broth. It became a centerpiece at banquets and special dinners, praised for its richness and sophisticated taste. What made it popular was not just flavor, but ingenuity. At a time when nothing went to waste, mock turtle soup demonstrated resourcefulness, turning parts of the animal that might otherwise be discarded into a celebrated meal. It reflected both the creativity of cooks and the social desire to impress guests with a dish that seemed exotic and refined. And yet, there's an emotional twist. Today, it's almost unimaginable to see such a dish served, and many Americans would recoil at the thought. But in its time, mock turtle soup was comfort, luxury, and a symbol of culinary cleverness. From the lavish Victorian table, we now move to a drink that might make you grimace just as much, but was beloved as a hangover cure, the prairie oyster. Point 2. Prairie oyster. Imagine walking into a 19th century American saloon and being offered a drink that sounds more like a meal than a cocktail. The prairie oyster, a raw egg served with vinegar, Worcestershire sauce, salt, and pepper, was precisely that, and it was surprisingly popular. Designed as a hangover cure, it was believed to restore vigor and clarity after a night of indulgence. The prairie oyster first gained notoriety in the late 1800s, particularly in bars across the Midwest and frontier towns. Its name evokes images of open plains and rugged cowboys, but the concoction was also served in cities where physicians and bartenders touted its restorative powers. The bright yolk, seasoned and sometimes shaken, was consumed in one bold gulp, a ritual of both bravery and desperation for many weary drinkers. Why did it endure? Beyond its supposed medicinal benefits, it became a social badge, a way to show toughness, resilience, or sophistication in knowing the proper cure for life's overindulgences. Saloon-goers embraced it not just for the results, but for the thrill of trying something daring and unusual. And yet, the twist is in our modern eyes. What was once a celebrated remedy now seems shocking, even grotesque. Raw egg drinks have largely disappeared from American tables, surviving mostly in stories, novels, and the occasional retro-themed bar. From this daring beverage, we now turn to a culinary treat that might make some cringe yet was a beloved snack for many hardworking Americans: pickled pig's feet. Point 3. Pickled pig's feet. Picture a rustic kitchen in 19th century America, where nothing went to waste and every part of an animal had a purpose. Among these culinary creations were pickled pig's feet, a dish that might make modern diners hesitate, yet it was a cherished snack for many working-class families. Boiled, seasoned, and preserved in a tangy brine, pig's feet were inexpensive, flavorful, and rich in protein, making them a practical choice for farmers, laborers, and southern households. The origins of pickled pig's feet trace back to both European traditions and Southern American ingenuity. In an era before refrigeration, pickling was a crucial preservation method, allowing families to store meats for months. The feet were simmered slowly with spices, vinegar, and sometimes onions, absorbing flavors that made each bite surprisingly tender and savory. Street vendors, markets, and home kitchens alike embraced this humble delicacy, transforming a seemingly unappealing ingredient into a source of pride and nourishment. Its popularity wasn't just about sustenance, it was also cultural. Pickled pig's feet were often enjoyed at gatherings, fairs, and social events, a testament to how resourcefulness and taste intersected. In many households, the dish carried a sense of tradition, passed down from generation to generation. Yet, the emotional twist is in our modern perspective. Today, the idea of eating pig's feet may seem shocking or even off-putting, but for 19th century Americans, it was comfort food, practicality, and culinary creativity all rolled into one. From this preserved snack, we now move to a hearty, survivalist dish that kept miners, pioneers, and sailors fed through tough times: slumgullion. Point 4. Slumgullion. Imagine a bubbling pot of stew on the campfire of a frontier settlement, its aroma filling the air as weary miners and pioneers gather around. This was slumgullion, a hearty, stew-like concoction made from leftover meats, vegetables, and sometimes cornmeal. Though the name might evoke humor today, in the 19th century it was a lifesaver, a filling, warming meal for those carving out lives on the American frontier. Slumgullion originated in mining camps, river towns, and on long overland journeys. Ingredients were whatever could be salvaged: scraps of meat, wilting vegetables, and pantry staples thrown together to create a nourishing, high-calorie meal. It wasn't fancy and it wasn't meant to impress guests, its value was in practicality. Miners at work from sunrise to sunset, or sailors on long voyages, relied on such resourceful dishes to sustain them through grueling days. The dish mattered because it symbolized resilience. It showcased the ingenuity of Americans in harsh environments, turning scarcity into sustenance. Slumgullion became a staple in frontier culture, a reminder that survival often depended on creativity in the kitchen as much as on the trail or in the mines. Yet there's a twist: what sounds humble, or even unappetizing today, was cherished in its time. People savored it, swapping recipes and adding personal touches to make it their own. It was a meal that told stories of hardship, community, and the pioneering spirit. From this survivalist stew, we now move to a dish that adorned elegant Victorian tables, transforming unusual cuts of meat into a celebratory feast: calf's head with tomato sauce. Point 5. Calf's head with tomato sauce. Picture a grand Victorian dining room, candlelight flickering over a polished table, and a dish being placed at the center that might make modern diners pause: calf's head with tomato sauce. Once considered a sophisticated entree, this dish transformed an unusual cut of meat into a centerpiece worthy of banquets and special occasions. Calf's head was simmered, seasoned, and often finished with a rich tomato-based sauce, sometimes accompanied by vegetables or breadcrumbs. The idea was both practical and refined, using every part of the animal while creating a dish that looked elegant and tasted luxurious. In 19th century America, particularly in urban centers and among wealthier households, this was a way to emulate European culinary trends, showcasing both resourcefulness and sophistication. Its popularity stemmed from more than flavor. Serving a dish like calf's head was a statement. It reflected a family's culinary knowledge, social standing, and respect for tradition. Guests marveled at the creativity behind turning what might seem like an unappetizing ingredient into a celebrated entree. Cookbooks of the era frequently included instructions, indicating its widespread acceptance and importance in the culinary culture of the time. The emotional twist? Today, the very idea of dining on a calf's head might feel shocking, even unsettling. But in its era, it represented ingenuity, elegance, and a connection to both tradition and survival. It's a reminder of how tastes evolve, and how what was once admired can become a curiosity for future generations. From this Victorian delicacy. Point 6. Jellied moose nose. Imagine a chilly New England winter, when families gather around the hearth and the scent of simmering meats fills the air. Among the region's quirkiest creations was jellied moose nose, a dish that perfectly exemplifies the 19th century waste-not approach to cooking. Yes, it was exactly what it sounds like: moose nose, boiled, seasoned, and set in a savory jelly. The dish originated in areas where moose were abundant, and every part of the animal was valued. Boiling the nose extracted gelatin, which, when cooled, created a firm, flavorful jelly. Spices, salt, and sometimes vinegar were added to balance the rich taste. While it might seem bizarre today, in its time, this preparation was both practical and considered a delicacy, especially in rural and frontier households. Its popularity reflected the realities of the era. Food preservation was essential, and jellied dishes allowed families to store and enjoy meats long after the hunt. Jellied moose nose also showcased ingenuity, turning an unusual cut into a dish that was not only edible but surprisingly palatable, even celebrated in local kitchens and communal meals. The twist? For modern diners, the very thought evokes a mixture of curiosity, amusement, and shock. Yet for 19th century Americans, it was comfort, tradition, and respect for the animal. A dish like this tells a story about resilience, creativity, and the sometimes surprising tastes of the past. From this New England oddity, we move to a rich, protein-packed treat that became a forgotten favorite in Pennsylvania kitchens: fried brain sandwiches. Point 7. Fried brain sandwich. Imagine walking into a bustling 19th century Pennsylvania kitchen, the smell of sizzling batter filling the air, and seeing a sandwich unlike any you know today: the fried brain sandwich. Made from cow or pig brains, battered, fried, and served between slices of bread, this protein-rich delicacy was both practical and surprisingly indulgent for its time. Fried brain sandwiches were especially popular in rural Pennsylvania and surrounding areas, where no part of the animal went to waste. Cooks turned what might seem an unusual ingredient into a tender, creamy filling that was both flavorful and satisfying. Often seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and occasionally a squeeze of lemon, the brains were fried until golden brown, creating a contrast between crispy exterior and soft interior. The dish's popularity stemmed from necessity and taste. In an era before supermarkets and packaged foods, families relied on locally sourced ingredients. Brains were affordable and abundant, providing a high-protein meal that could feed a family without expensive cuts of meat. Street vendors and small-town diners also served the sandwiches, making them a common treat for workers, farmers, and students. The emotional twist? Today, the idea of eating a brain sandwich can shock or even repel modern diners. But in the 19th century, it was comfort food, ingenuity, and nourishment rolled into one. It's a reminder that tastes and cultural norms around food can shift dramatically over time. From this forgotten delicacy, we we now move to a holiday treat with a curious combination of meat and fruit, mince pie with meat and fruit. Point 8. Mince pie with meat and fruit. Picture a 19th century American holiday table, adorned with candles, polished silver, and the sweet-spiced aroma of freshly baked pies. Among the festive offerings sat the mince pie with meat and fruit, a curious combination that might seem unusual to modern eyes. Unlike the entirely sweet versions we know today, these pies blended chopped meats, often beef or venison, with spices, dried fruits, and sometimes suet, creating a rich, savory sweet flavor that was cherished during the holidays. The tradition came from British immigrants, who brought their recipes across the Atlantic. Early Americans adapted the pies to local ingredients and tastes, using what was available while keeping the essence of a holiday treat. Mince pies were often small, handheld delights, perfect for serving to family and guests during festive gatherings. Their appeal was both practical and symbolic. The combination of meat and fruit symbolized prosperity, while the rich spices conveyed warmth and celebration. Why it mattered is simple. These pies connected Americans to their heritage while providing a filling and festive treat. Families would bake dozens at a time, exchanging them with neighbors or enjoying them through the long winter months. The twist? Today, the idea of meat in a dessert pie seems almost shocking. Yet for 19th century Americans, it was comfort, tradition, and culinary creativity all in one bite. Each mince pie told a story of adaptation, cultural heritage, and the tastes that defined an era. From this festive fusion, we now move to a beloved coastal dish that made use of the abundant bounty of American shores, oyster pie. Point 9. Oyster pie. Imagine the bustling coastal towns of 19th century America, where the scent of the sea mingled with the aromas of bustling kitchens. Here, oyster pie was a favorite, a dish that showcased both abundance and ingenuity. Plump oysters harvested from nearby waters were baked in a buttery crust, often with onions, spices, and sometimes a splash of cream, creating a rich, savory pie that delighted locals and visitors alike. Oysters were plentiful in the 1800s, especially along the eastern seaboard, making them an affordable and versatile ingredient. The pie became a staple not only in coastal homes but also in urban taverns and markets, where it was served hot as a hearty lunch or dinner. Its appeal lay in its simplicity and comfort. The oysters provided a tender, briny filling, while the pastry offered a satisfying crunch, making every bite a celebration of the sea. Oyster pie mattered because it reflected regional identity and the resourcefulness of American cooks. It was a dish that embraced local ingredients and traditions, turning simple seafood into a comforting and even indulgent meal. Families would pass down recipes, adding personal touches or seasonal variations, ensuring that each pie had its own unique story. The emotional twist? Today, oysters are often considered a luxury, and the idea of a baked oyster pie might seem unusual to modern diners. But in the 19th century, it was everyday indulgence, practicality, and the joy of coastal living all in one dish. From this seafood treasure, we now move to a gelatinous dessert that was once considered both sweet and healthful, calf's foot jelly. Point 10. Calf's foot jelly. Picture a 19th century American kitchen, where boiling pots bubbled on the hearth, and the goal wasn't just nourishment, but sometimes health, tradition, and indulgence. One such creation was calf's foot jelly, a gelatinous dessert made by simmering calves' feet until the natural gelatin was released, then sweetened and flavored with sugar, spices, or fruit. It was a treat that bridged practicality with a touch of luxury. Calf's foot jelly was more than just a dessert. In an era before commercial gelatin and packaged desserts, it was prized for its texture, flavor, and believed restorative qualities. Many considered it a healthful dish, full of collagen and nutrients thought to strengthen the body. Families prepared it for special occasions, festive dinners, or simply as a comforting treat during long winters. Its popularity lay in its simplicity and ingenuity. Boiling the calf's feet extracted every bit of flavor and nutrition, while transforming an overlooked ingredient into something elegant and delightful. Recipes often varied, with each household adding its own twist, vanilla, citrus, or a dusting of nutmeg, to make the jelly uniquely theirs. The twist? Today, gelatin desserts are taken for granted, and the idea of using calves' feet might seem shocking or even off-putting. Yet in the 19th century, it was cherished, celebrated, and a testament to the creativity and resourcefulness of cooks of the time. From this gelatinous dessert, we move from kitchens to the frontier, where survival sometimes required daring ingredients like rattlesnake stew. Point 11. Rattlesnake stew. Imagine the open plains of the American frontier, where pioneers, hunters, and settlers relied on whatever the land could provide. Among the more daring dishes of the 19th century was rattlesnake stew, a survivalist meal that turned a venomous snake into a nutritious and surprisingly flavorful stew. Rattlesnake was abundant in many frontier regions, and its meat was lean, high in protein, and easy to cook over a fire. Cooks would clean and cut the snake into pieces, then simmer it slowly with available vegetables, herbs, and sometimes a splash of vinegar or spices. The resulting stew was hearty, filling, and often considered a delicacy in remote areas where other meats were scarce. The dish mattered because it exemplified the ingenuity and resilience of frontier life. Survival depended on knowledge of the land and its resources, and meals like rattlesnake stew were not just sustenance, they were a testament to the adaptability and courage of early Americans. Eating it also became a kind of badge of honor, a story to tell fellow settlers about one's daring and resourcefulness. The emotional twist? Today, the idea of eating rattlesnake might shock many, yet for pioneers, it was simply food, a practical, sometimes celebrated part of life in untamed regions. It reflects a time when every meal carried the story of struggle, survival, and human ingenuity. From this frontier specialty, we move to a farmstead favorite that offered lean, flavorful protein where beef was scarce: roast goat with herbs. Point 12. Roast goat with herbs. Picture a 19th century rural farmhouse, the scent of roasting meat mingling with fresh herbs from the garden. Among the everyday meals of hardworking Americans was roast goat with herbs, a simple yet flavorful dish that provided lean protein where beef or pork was less accessible. Goat meat was common in farms and rural communities across the country. Farmers raised goats for milk, but the meat was also prized for its tenderness and subtle flavor. Roasting it with herbs, sage, rosemary, or thyme enhanced the taste and created a dish that was both satisfying and nourishing. Families would often gather around the table, enjoying a meal that reflected self-sufficiency and the practical use of available resources. The dish mattered because it was emblematic of rural ingenuity. Goat meat was economical and sustainable, and seasoning it with herbs demonstrated the care and creativity of home cooks. It wasn't just sustenance, it was a reflection of family tradition, community, and the rhythm of farm life, where every meal told a story of hard work and resourcefulness. The emotional twist? Today, goat meat is often seen as exotic or unusual in many parts of the U.S., yet in the 19th century, it was comfort food, a staple of everyday life, and a reminder that taste is deeply tied to culture and context. From this farmstead favorite, we now move to a humble yet essential dish that fed countless working-class families: boiled tripe. Point 13. Boiled tripe. Picture a 19th century working-class kitchen, where nothing was wasted and every scrap of food had a purpose. Among these resourceful meals was boiled tripe, made from the stomach lining of cows. Though it might seem unappetizing today, in its time, tripe was a cheap, protein-rich staple that nourished families and sustained laborers through long, grueling days. Tripe was typically boiled slowly, often with onions, spices, and sometimes vegetables, transforming an otherwise tough and bland ingredient into a tender, flavorful dish. It was widely consumed in urban centers, rural homes, and immigrant communities, especially among those who needed affordable, filling meals. Cookbooks of the era often included detailed instructions for preparing tripe, reflecting its status as a practical yet valued part of the diet. The dish mattered because it symbolized ingenuity and frugality. It demonstrated how 19th-century Americans made the most of available resources, turning humble ingredients into nourishing, sometimes comforting, meals. For working-class families, tripe wasn't just food, it was survival, community, and traditions served on a plate. The twist? Modern palates may recoil at the idea of boiled stomach lining, but for the people of the 19th century, it was a familiar, dependable, and sometimes even beloved dish. It's a reminder that what seems strange or unappealing today was once an integral part of daily life and culture. From this humble staple, we move to a dish that was both simple and versatile, providing warmth and sustenance in countless households. Cornmeal mush with molasses. Point 14. Cornmeal mush with molasses. Picture a modest 19th century kitchen, the morning light streaming through a window, and a pot of cornmeal mush slowly simmering on the stove. Simple, humble, and nourishing, this porridge-like dish was a staple for countless American households, providing warmth, energy, and comfort. Often served with a drizzle of sweet molasses or a pat of butter, it transformed a basic ingredient into a versatile, satisfying meal. Cornmeal mush was made by boiling finely ground cornmeal in water or milk until it thickened into a soft, creamy consistency. It could be eaten hot for breakfast, cooled and sliced for frying, or sweetened with molasses, making it adaptable to both savory and sweet tastes. For families with limited resources, it was an affordable, filling, and reliable source of sustenance. The dish mattered because it represented the ingenuity of everyday Americans. Corn was widely grown and accessible, and mush demonstrated how simple ingredients could be transformed into something nourishing and even comforting. It became a ritual of home life, connecting families to the land and to traditions passed down through generations. The emotional twist? Today, the idea of eating plain cornmeal mush may seem plain or outdated, but for 19th century Americans, it was comfort, sustenance, and a testament to making the most of what you had. Each spoonful carried memories of early mornings, hard-working families, and a time when simplicity was both necessity and art. From this humble, hearty dish, we now turn to a delicacy that might make modern diners squeamish but was a beloved urban treat: eel pie. Point 15. Eel pie. Imagine a crowded 19th century city street, the aroma of baked goods and savory pies wafting through the air, and a curious delicacy catching the eye of passers-by: eel pie. Made with minced eel, spices, and encased in flaky pastry, this unusual dish was a staple in certain urban communities, particularly in areas where fresh seafood was abundant and adventurous palates were celebrated. Eel pies have roots in European traditions, brought to America by immigrants and adapted to local tastes and ingredients. The eels were cleaned, minced, and mixed with onions, herbs, and sometimes a rich sauce before being baked in a pastry crust. Affordable and filling, these pies became a popular street food and home-cooked meal, satisfying families, laborers, and curious city dwellers alike. The dish mattered because it highlighted the creativity and resourcefulness of urban cooks. Eel was abundant, inexpensive, and nutritious, yet transforming it into a baked pie elevated it from survival food to something enjoyable and even festive. Sharing an eel pie could be both practical and social, a meal that brought people together around innovation and taste. The emotional twist? Today, the thought of eating eel in a pie may seem strange or even shocking, but in the 19th century, it was comfort, culture, and culinary adventure all in one bite. It reminds us that history is filled with flavors and traditions that challenge modern assumptions, yet offer a glimpse into the daily lives and tastes of a bygone America. As we close our journey through these 15 extraordinary dishes, we are reminded that the 19th century was a time of ingenuity, resilience, and curiosity at the American table. From the luxurious mock turtle soup of Victorian banquets to the daring frontier flavors of rattlesnake stew, these foods tell stories not just of survival, but of culture, creativity, and the everyday lives of Americans long past. Each dish reflects a moment in history, a time when cooks transformed humble or unusual ingredients into meals that were nourishing, comforting, and even celebratory. They remind us that food is more than sustenance. It is tradition, memory, and a window into the values and experiences of the people who came before us. Some of these recipes might shock modern diners, while others may surprise with their ingenuity or charm, but all carry the unmistakable imprint of a bygone era. Thank you for stepping back in time with us, exploring the flavors, quirks, and stories of 19th century America. If you enjoyed this journey into forgotten tastes and forgotten times, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more nostalgic, surprising, and hidden chapters of American history. Who knows what strange and wonderful meals await us next?